So this year's college football playoff predictions, keeping in mind that we have Clemson coming out of the ACC, we got Ohio State coming out of the Big Ten, we got Iowa State coming out of the Big 12, got Bama out of the SEC, and we have Oregon out of the Pac-12. I have not spoken about Notre Dame. I do not expect them to be in this top 4, top 5 range. I do not expect Cincinnati to be in this top 4, top 5 range. Now, having said that, that means I think they're going to have losses, or at least one. I cannot state in clear enough terms, if Cincinnati is undefeated this year, regardless of what my opinion has been, and it's been a very strong one in the past, about the inclusion of G5 teams in the playoff, they're going to be in the playoff, in my not-so-humble opinion. So I think that, but I don't think it's going to get tested, although in an alternate universe I wish we could see it. I don't think we're going to test that theory, because I think they are going to have at least one loss. Listen, they could have conference losses. It's a hard conference to win. That American Athletic Conference is a hard conference to win. Some would indicate to you tougher than 1 or 2 Power 5 conferences. I'll leave that up to you guys. Let's take a look at our playoff field, I guess we call it, though. The Clemson Tigers, I'm putting in as the #1 overall seed. It is the only team that the model is choosing to go undefeated, which kind of tips the model's cap as to what it thinks is going to happen in Week 1, Clemson versus Georgia. Now, when we pick that game on Tuesday, I reserve the right to do the manual override, just as I did with Iowa State and Oklahoma. But the model does like Clemson in that game. So it's the easiest path to 12-0. You're probably 70% of the way to being undefeated, given their conference schedule, once they get through that game. If they do end up beating Georgia, their toughest games, to give you an idea, as you look at Arkansas' schedule and they play half the AFC South, Clemson's toughest remaining games, it looks like right now, are at NC State and at Pitt. So there you go. If you can get through that, and they will be huge favorites, they could be 3+ touchdown favorites against the rest of their schedule. That's not their fault. It is very much the fault of the rest of the conference. Hopefully, part of that conference comes a little ways in rectifying that problem this year. But Clemson is my #1 seed. I've got Ohio State as the #2 seed. It feels like the best shot they have to lose is before November. Our models got them going 11-1 before the conference title game. Now, a lot of you asked me the other day, where's the loss? Where's the loss? And I had to explain it's a very boring response. I don't do the whole put your 12-game schedule on a board and go win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. We have a percentage chance per 1,000 game simulations of how likely you are to win the game, and then we just aggregate it. Well, the model does. We're too lazy to. So it just finds a total of 1 Ohio State loss. It doesn't pick the game. Again, boring, I know. That's why we don't really do a whole lot of prediction segments on the show. But if the Buckeyes do lose, and it's not to Michigan, stop laughing. Stop doing that. If it's not to Michigan, it's probably been earlier in the season. Maybe it's Penn State, maybe it's one of these early season games. They just don't have their wheels under them yet. But whatever it is, they've had plenty of time to rectify it. And when this Ohio State team eventually hits its stride, whenever that is this year, they're going to be tough to deal with. It may be Week 1, or it may be Week 4, Week 5, but it's going to be at some point. These teams with this much talent, they don't ever go an entire season without eventually finding that gear. You just got to get them early enough to where it doesn't matter when they find the gear. And when they find that gear, I think they're going to be right there with that 1 or 2 seed. And so we've got Clemson, Ohio State. Bama, I've got in the 3rd spot. The model has Bama going 12-1. This one is not so difficult for me to foresee. I think there's a loss somewhere on Bama's regular season schedule. Like I said in the conference predictions, it could be that I watch Alabama in Week 1 against Miami, which is a very, very good test. It's plenty good enough athletic test for us to gauge Alabama. It could be that we watch them and we say, Nick Saban has done it again. I do not believe this. A new OC, all these new pieces, and look at them just going up and down the field. If that's the case, then my feel is wrong, probably. And if that's the case, you can go ahead and pencil them in as the #1 seed here. I don't think that's the case. I think they're a very good team. I'm starting them off as my top-ranked team, which tells you what I think about them. But I also think that college football is relative to who you play. Of course, I'd have Bama the #1 seed if they play Clemson's schedule. They don't. There are some tests here. Like, I know a lot of you have to see Texas A&M move the ball up and down the field to believe they can beat Alabama. They can beat Alabama. Florida, with some turnover help and the factor of home field in their corner, could have a puncher's chance of beating Alabama. The Point is, with Bama, you never believe it can happen until it happens. I've picked them to lose 2 games since 2010. One of them was the Manziel game. One of them was the 2019 Iron Bowl. I was 2-0 on them. So I'm not picking them to lose any game right now, but I'm saying that's how few and far between my picks of Alabama loss are. I'm telling you, I'm not seeing one specific one. I'm telling you the total, the sum total of this schedule this year could take a toll. I think there's a loss somewhere. But just like Ohio State, those young receivers, that offensive line, Bryce Young himself, eventually this is all going to gel, and I think the defense is going to be there from week 1. And when they do, they'll be as tough and out as anyone in the country. So we got Bama winning the SEC, and we got them in that number 3 spot here. Iowa State, I have making the playoff at number 4, which if it happened, I think a lot of folks would enjoy, not just Texas fans, because it would mean Oklahoma doesn't make the playoff. I'm not talking about that crowd. I'm talking about the crowd that thinks there is this ceiling or maybe even sort of an electric fence around a few programs and no one else is allowed in the playoff. And you've been told the system keeps everyone else out. Now, I love Iowa State. I have heavy bias. I will not pretend otherwise. So I hope this happens selfishly, but I hope a lot of stuff happens selfishly that I don't pick on this show, I can assure you. So I'm behind this. For better or for worse, I'm behind this pick. And as you know, these shows live forever. So if they lose to Northern Iowa in week 1, you know, if they look a little suspect in week 2 against Iowa and they drop like the 40th game in a row against the Hawkeyes, then yeah, you can rag me. That's fine. But I'm going to sit behind this pick. But my question is not about the winner of the Big 12 going to the playoff, because I believe they'll be there. My question becomes, if this is an undefeated Oklahoma team and somehow their only loss is to Iowa State, however that ends up happening, then what does the committee do? Because you only got 4 spots. What does the committee do there? That remains to be seen. I would be fascinated if that were to play out that way, because I think that Iowa State's going to peak at the right time. My whole feel behind this is, regardless of what happens in that first go-around, I think they're going to peak at the right time. I also think there's a lot to be said for the intangible factors that are probably going to have, or that team will have on their side this year. The chemistry aspect, you know, the stuff people talk a lot about in lieu of actual football, I think it actually matters with them this year. And they got good players. They got very good players. I think they'll have enough to win the Big 12. So, with that in mind, you see Clemson, Iowa State, you see Ohio State and Alabama, or Clemson, Iowa State, yes. I haven't said it a whole lot, so it seems weird when it comes out of my mouth. I'm taking Clemson to win the national championship. And the reason is because I'm looking up and down and knowing the formula for Dabo Swinney, and I'm saying, well, he's got every box checked. Finally, he's got a few people doubting him. You know my thoughts on that, but there are a few people out there doubting him. They've got a phenomenal quarterback. I don't really care so much about the experience. Nebraska's got a quarterback that's been there since I was in 8th grade. Did you see how much experience mattered at quarterback yesterday for Nebraska? They went backwards as much as they went forward. You got to have talent. You got to have, in this case, you got to have star-level talent, and then the experience will come. But, man, when you got guys like DJ Uiagalelei, there's something about that level of talent that can supplement a lot of that experience. Plus, when you get to this point, you got a year's worth of experience anyway. Oh, and by the way, you're facing Bryce Young in the playoff. You're facing C.J. Stroud in the playoff. How many games have they started? So all that's irrelevant. If anything, he's got a little edge up on him. The wide receiver room is going to be a huge difference for them this year. Will Shipley, among others, in the backfield as the season goes on, is going to be a huge difference. They can afford to use their entire schedule as scrimmages, which they've been known to do in the past. I don't criticize them for it. It's the exact same thing I would do if I were Clemson. But that team will time this up, because they've done it before, and they'll get to December, and they will look like they've been shot out of a cannon, learning from their past mistakes and shortfalls, having the defensive line with seasoning about it now, probably the best in the country this year. I got Clemson winning the national championship. I hinted at it 2 weeks ago. No one ever talked me off of it. So give me the Clemson Tigers. There you see our full playoff field. If you're listening on the pod, we got Clemson 1, Ohio State 2, Alabama 3, Iowa State 4, #GoClones, but in the end, it is Go Tigers. Clemson wins the national championship.